regardless of any hesitation, trying to allow myself, basically force myself. I'm trying to go against the lack of motivation, hesitation spell that affects us when we become really stuck with ourselves during this isolation time, and any isolation time, when we are stuck with things that we want to do. Look at that. So good. But we don't always allow ourselves to do it based on... I never really decided to use the word programming until recently. Based on what was just termed lack of motivation, I would ask myself why. I would say, well, sure, I want to do that. I would try to coach myself, talk myself into doing certain things. And it would be, well, then I do it, then why? Then what? Then what of it? What? Other people might learn something, other people might observe something. It might improve the perspective of somebody, which is probably the main reason why I would share anything online. I want to connect my sharings. I want to connect in a way where I'm sharing and a perspective is improved. But I'm wanting the connection. So I've been struggling for connection because I've been struggling with sharing. I've been struggling with, and during this time especially, that's been the thing that's been kind of hard to acknowledge. Well, it hasn't been hard to accept because I've been saying it vocally a lot and telling it to people. But the vulnerability of what to do about it, like to just do things that I haven't been wanting to do or pushing myself, I guess that takes a type of vulnerability. When I think of vulnerability, I think of others observing and considering what they think. That's to me what vulnerability is. Considering it as though it matters type thing. Considering being preoccupied with how people are perceiving me. Even just saying me offers a lot of vulnerability. I'm trying to identify with, it's not freezing, I just love the way this scarf feels. You gotta understand this. This is a download, and I'm coming on to have my morning video journal. Not with any intention to share it, but I definitely want to share. I want to share it in some way because I know that I'm getting close to sharing, I guess, more frequently or in a way that is more freeing. I have freed myself from certain programs, like when you go out and get a new computer, you know. I've been aware of this process of integration. I've been aware of this upgrading process and the way in which to upgrade. I am aware of activations. I've been creating all these foundations for something, foundations for getting back into YouTubing or sending a message, sharing a message, and obviously YouTube, social media, that's where people share their message. I'm open to seeing how else I can consider sharing, because I want to be unplugged, but I'm on a new path that is involving plugging in to these outlets to allow myself to express and be creative and to share again. So that's why dealing with the vulnerability and what that means and how to channel it, how to access it for the purpose of delivering me and my core authenticity, because that's the way you access it, really, is by being vulnerable. I mean, sharing without the filters of perception and without any sort of hesitation or disapproval or, self-judging and things like that, without the self-defeating thoughts. That to me is, it's going to channel, it's going to push you into heightening your abilities, your accessing abilities of your authenticity, your perspective, the correct perspective. So what is the correct perspective? Well, that's just how we view ourselves from the heart. I think if we allow ourselves to view ourselves from the heart, that is the correct perspective. Allow as though God was witnessing you. How do you want to feel if you want to be witnessed by somebody with compassion, somebody with a sense of perhaps like that authority, like your parents? How do you want to be viewed? You want to be accepted, and you want to share in the love that you want to have with your Creator, with your parents, your family, God, nature, the entire earth. You want the earth to be, in a sense, holding you. If you were to have a vision of what it is that you want to feel being alive and what do you want to access, it would be like a big hug from this planet for me and all of its people. That would be the vision. The end vision would be the idea of all of creation giving me a big hug, and then I go off to my next life. I got the big hug. I feel that I accomplished my perspective of enlightenment, whatever that is. I want to access what enlightenment means to me, and that involves a journey of sharing and connecting. So it's just a real basic journey to my version of enlightenment, because I'm not trying to access a deep space where I can say, hey, look what I've created. I've made this little hole in the wall so I can meditate for 6 years, and yeah, it all worked out. I found enlightenment. No, I would create a space for others to go for several years, for the rest of my life even, and that would be the result of what I sought out for enlightenment, for what feels like I have created a world, because we can all create our own world, and that's the world that I would want to create, as a space where people can go to work on themselves. And the reason why I have come up with this space, it's always a space, and a lot of people always have that dream of a community space and, a beautiful piece of land, and people create a new earth type thing. But mine is more of an education center. It's a new way of educating, and I've always dreamed of, obviously, it being close to this beautiful community space and land where there's a wonderful village life. But it is a school system. It's to repair the errors in my public education. It's to repair that memory, that sense of trauma, that basically that disengagement. I felt disconnected fully from my true self because I was given a type of programming. So that's what kind of freaked me out when I watched this documentary about programming. I was like, oh, I've even used those words. I'm deprogramming, or I'm defragmenting myself, and I'm installing new programs. That was how I describe described my current life, what's going on, is I would say that, but then I really wasn't actually saying and accessing the truth of it being that I had programming already, and that because of my programming, that's why my perspective is the way it is. That's why I'm having a lack of motivation, a challenge to get the fruits of who I am back. When I think of getting myself back, I have very nostalgic memories of being young and carefree, and you don't think about time and you don't have anything to worry about. Yes, that's a very healthy perspective of when we think of the beautiful life on earth and our freedom. We have childhood memories. For some, maybe they weren't good. For me, that's what I would think of. And I would also think of independent times where I'm taking care of myself and I'm living independently and I'm very successful and I don't have any relationship dynamics. That always created a lot more confusion, just like school did. It created a type of programming. There is a shame involved in school as well as in relationships. There is a constant theme of shame. The reason why I would identify with it is because I would identify with it. I realized the story was a sense of lacking from the way school handled me, and the way I handled life was reactionary, with a sense of disappointment, with a sense of distrust and disgust for the time that I wasted and things like that, and not having any sort of a proper footing in the world that I had to create. I ended up having to create my own world of how I would survive and make a living, and having to create all of my own footing, all of my foundation. It was very challenging and it got really discouraging. There was definitely an awareness of, wow, I will do this because I have to do this. And I won't always know how long I'll do it or what the end result will be, because when you go to college, you know what the end result is. You sort of start looking. You know what you have to do. You don't know what the end result is going to be. I never knew really what I had to do because I would never be able to do it the normal way that people do it. So I was always creating my own way and just believing in myself and just believing in what I do. That's why I created tea with intention. The intention is the secret ingredient. It's like belief. It's like a strong sense of belief. You create a belief and then you put it out there, and the intention holds it together. It builds the belief into a reality type thing. For me, believing in myself wasn't always the ticket to reality. It was just how I made real this life. The way I made something real is if I carefully chose what I was doing. Basically, carefully chose what I believed in. And what I was doing, it had to reflect productivity. It had to basically reflect a type of programming. And I tried to program myself as much as possible because I never had a lot of programming. I never paid attention to a lot of stuff that would create negative programming. But we still have, even in our own programming, programs that need to be reviewed and discarded. It's a lot worse if they are from the media. That's a lot worse if we come from an abusive, challenging home or something where being programmed by the elite is the worst. I mean, there is others, but it's either that or we program ourselves. My programming that needed to be reviewed and reinstalled with others is the limiting beliefs. Programming as a result of school and relationships. Relationships reflected a lot of the lackings that school offered. So whenever I was in a relationship, I would always feel like I'm in doubt of how I'm being perceived, just like I would have that same sort of concern with teachers and students. Is they're going to think I'm a slacker sort of vibe, so let's be a class clown, let's make it funny so that I understand my role. So I'd be the class clown, and that would help them relate to me. That would help me relate to what it is I'm even going to do in this environment. Hopefully it's going to be funny, because it sure is funny to think that they would assume that I would grasp any of this reality. And so if I was in a relationship, it was kind of me trying to figure out where my role was going to fit in with this person, because they are either going to want to be entertained in some way, because I may not provide the type of connection that would benefit them, or they would, or I would just feel a lacking from within, and it would manifest in how I project myself, and the mirroring that I would do would be from a place of insecurity, and just like I am frustrated, like I was in school. So I'd be frustrated a lot. I'd get really easily frustrated, because relationships just make me think of more to do. Like, oh, this is like a test. This is like a really long essay. I don't feel into it, because my perspective of relationships is very different. If I were to be in an actual relationship, it wouldn't be an earthly type. It would in the new earth, with the new humans, like with a new way of perceiving this life as a human and our perspective. Like there is a new way to develop connection that is blossoming, but it's always been relationships have always been inaccurate for what I would be seeking if I were to take them as one would take a class. It would not be something that I would be interested in learning, but I was interested in relationships because of the learning. Whatever learning was involved that I couldn't get in school, I would try to get through relationships. They were all challenging. They were just all too challenging. They provided results, but when I say challenging, it's not that I gave up. It's just it got to that point where that's why they weren't successful. There was a familiar experience and thing that I identified with of giving up. And that feeling of wanting a teacher to give you more time, or to give you a chance to give basically more time. So there's a lot of programming. I don't know if I was able to get into the specifics of what exactly, but that's the gist of it. There's a lot of negative programming of our outlook of ourselves is changed if we don't take the programming, which is the education itself, and we excel at it, and we apply that programming. There's negative programming if we suck at it and we fail and we don't absorb any of the knowledge. We receive our own type of programming, which is basically, it originally comes from the public school programming, but it's kind of like a negative reaction of a pill that you swallow. There's a somewhat positive looking reaction of the pill, by you doing a normal American life, having a successful everything, and being really rushed off to do it in a certain time frame, and by the time you're 30, you got all these things and family and house. And so the other programming that resulted, it was negative, and a lot of it I had to create, but it was as a result of the original programming. So it's not actually my programming. It's laced with the original programming. So that was what this download this morning and after watching this documentary the other night was about, is identifying the programming and how I became attached and I identified with that programming, and then to give it my own twist of how I could understand it, I created my own programming on top of it. So I reprogrammed it with errors, original errors that were in there, not realizing that I had to completely remove the programming and the errors and make my own from scratch. I still pretty much did that, but what happened is everything took a lot longer for me to figure out or do on my own. It just took a long time to get to these stages. I was very healthy with myself. I have had a very productive life, but in terms of relational connection, I definitely did a lot of connecting as a videographer, and but when it all sort of changed, when I moved to a small town, it became very depressed and very hard to connect with. Embarrassing. Like, I used to be this pretty easygoing, connecting type person, but I was in the programming of being very busy, trying to be successful, trying to get ahead, trying to save money, trying to live in the city. I go into this town and you don't have any of the city programming, so I dropped a lot of programs, not realizing that there is a effect much like a withdrawal effect of a drug. I didn't want to blame it on this idea of withdrawal, and that's the reason why I am depressed or just really having a hard time fitting in. But I definitely was aware that I was in a process of integration, and that was accurate. But that integration meant deprogramming and flushing out any sense of doubt, any sense of myself being led into a space of self-defeating thoughts, lack, and giving myself the way, the program on how to access amazing energy, amazing motivation, and amazing clarity. Because those are the things that I was really needing so that I could just completely be where I want to be, emotionally, I would say, before anything else. I was just struggling with the delay of wanting to feel emotionally content as I'm getting close to the age of 40. I just thought, yeah, that's not something to beat myself up over. People struggle with emotions well into their 40s. But I feel my personal goal would be to feel content. So I don't think that I'm delayed in that result, but in the original programming of where one thinks they're supposed to be, I have always felt delayed and that I should be a lot further than where I am. So that's always been a concern with relationships, is are they going to judge me for where I'm at? Are they going to judge me for the fact that I don't use a car or a phone and I don't have a house, but I'm very free? I have chosen the programming of freedom that I created. There's a lot of freedom in my life, and I've created many programs that basically point always point to some level of freedom from being too busy, from being